Welcome to Concerning the Spiritual in Art, a podcast exploring spirituality, consciousness, and the creative process. I'm your host, Martin Benson. Welcome back to Concerning the Spiritual in Art. I'm Martin Benson, and today I have a really special episode for you. We're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to be interviewing a musician. I know we've been exploring visual art a lot. That's what I do. It's a big part of what I'm interested in, but I'm also interested in creatives of all kinds, not just musicians and visual artists, but writers. And so reaching out to a lot of different guests. And today will not disappoint. I interviewed Matt Blankenship, the lead singer of the Sometimes Island, this amazing indie pop sort of synth pop band from Los Angeles. And we just had the most incredible conversation. It went to so many places. We talked about, his musicianship, his history as a musician, but also like creative process in terms of songwriting. But then it really got into some other kind of territories, talking about consciousness and sort of the relationship between like sound waves and light waves and healing, and sort of how all these things tie together to sort of guide us on our journey as artists. And it's just a really inspiring conversation. We had so much fun recording it, and I think y'all are going to enjoy it a lot. So here you go, Matt Blankenship. All right. All right, Matt, welcome to the podcast, dude. Super excited to have you here and to reconnect. How are you doing?
It's so good to be here, man. I'm imagining some like theme music going on in the background that might still
Yeah,
be happening at this point. The
that's
magic of
awesome, dude.
post-production.
And for those of you that don't know, Matt and I actually met way back in college, and we always kind of really connected, just both being artists and creatives. And it's just super special to be able to kind of circle back with you here in this kind of format. I wanted to kind of start us off by just sort of exploring your musical origins. So Matt is a part of this band, like you've heard in the intro, the Sometimes Island, and it's just like synth pop, indie pop music, but there's just so much beauty and light and fun, but also really deep qualities to the music and the lyrics. And I'm excited to kind of explore it more. But how did this all begin for you?
Well, music in general has always been like, dude, I used to have this like cassette, one of these like cassette players where you could record stuff on there, and I would like be like recording myself on these little cassette tapes and stuff. And Um, like I would stay up at night when I was like 5 or 6 and be just like singing Christmas songs like super loud, like in the middle of the summer or whatever. My mom would
Nice.
have to like come in the room and be like, we're sleeping. Like, can you please stop? So looking back, it seems pretty like obvious that I would choose to, go down this path of being a musician professionally. But it's been a long, weird journey. Like with this band, the Sometimes Island, it started as a side project to other stuff that I was doing. And I think that helped it because it was this way of me being able to like step out of the room or whatever I was doing with what other band or whatever and make what I really wanted to make and make the stuff that I could hear in my head, and there's no deadline on, this needs to be out or these other people need to, like this thing about it or that, and just really express myself in this way. That was the last time I really felt similar was, when I was like 14 and like first starting to make music in my bedroom and stuff in Texas where I was growing up. So that's the
That's
long answer.
awesome, man. So you felt like you had to kind of like claim your artistry. Like sometimes it's because music is such a collaborative thing. And what's interesting about bringing, you on this podcast, like me being a visual artist, I definitely have a lot of visual artists on here, but I want to like expand sort of the genre of this, what we can explore in this podcast, because artistry and creativity all have a lot of similarities in terms of process. But a big one with being a musician in a band is that collaborative quality. And I can imagine at times if you're not really driving that ship and it's obvious you have such like a deep creative vision and sort of aesthetic that you're trying to express. And so when that gets sort of limited, it doesn't
Mhm.
feel the same, So in a way,
Yeah.
this band, the Sometimes Island, was kind of like a liberation for you creatively. Would you agree with that?
100%. Like I've had my heart broken by the music that I've been playing so many times in so many different phases of my life. I remember being a teenager and like listening to my favorite bands on like my like CD player or whatever and being like,
What is that?
why?
I've never heard it.
What's up, kids?
I
It's
know, right?
just Google it.
Yeah.
Um and not wondering like why my music couldn't sound like this music that I was hearing. The first album that I ever really recorded in a studio was my college band PS Nevermind. And that was so that was like USC times. So we knew each other back then. And I recorded this album and I just listened to it afterwards and I just was like in tears. I was like, it sounds nothing like what I heard this sounding like in my head.
Oh
Like there
man.
was, and so the more music that I've played and gotten better at like kind of connecting what I hear in my head with what's actually there and available to come out of a speaker has gotten better as I've gotten better, but also there's a like knowing when to compromise and when not to on something and knowing how to not tell somebody what to play but like get them on like completely enrolled in your vision of like what is happening in this song so that they aren't looking to you for what to do next. They know like the tone and the vibe of the song and they can express it in ways that you hadn't even thought of yet that
Wow.
are completely synergized, you know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah, dude, I love
So,
that way of collaborating because, like, there's always this push and pull when you do collaborative projects, and to
mhm.
be able to, give the partners space to be creative and express themselves is so important too for like the holistic nature of what it is you're going to be creating.
Yes.
I love that you were conscious of that. I could imagine a lot of people in musical groups like just you can get myopic with your vision and it can be
Yeah.
like all or nothing, but there's a push and pull there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really interesting to hear that you're like thinking in that way.
Yeah, there's a lot of egos in music, and you can get myopic with even being like the side kind of person. I've played with people who I won't name who are like, yeah, but like I'm gonna put my stamp on this song, or like I'm gonna do my thing too because I'm me. And not every song calls for like everybody's like logo to be like kind of like just stamped into whatever,
Right.
regardless of its content. Like you have to be able to yeah, like live that vision of this. Like, it'd be like an actor getting hired for a movie and being like, I'm gonna say my like personal catchphrase from my life at some point in this movie. Like what
No, I, that's such a good point, man. I think like being artists, like the ego is something that we have to be aware of, but also have to manage a
Mhm.
lot. And I think and it gets the best, and I can say in my own experience, it's definitely
Mm.
gotten the best of me in my past. But like the more I'm creating, the more I'm learning how to kind of let go of that quality of the ego that wants to control, and trying
Mhm.
to find this more freedom to collaborate but not be attached to like the sense of like praise and identity and wanting
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that, I mean, everybody has an ego and has to deal with it, but I think when you're an artist sometimes it can be a lot more on the forefront of like creating issues for you
Oh,
and
totally.
creatively.
Yeah, you've probably heard it because I think it's a William Faulkner quote. I think I even talked about this on another podcast, but like the Stephen King adapted it where it's like, kill your darlings. Have you heard that quote?
No, kill
Where
your
it's like,
darlings. Yeah.
yeah, William Faulkner said in writing, you must kill your darlings. And
Wow.
Stephen King's version of it was, dude, this is just like my favorite quote. This comes
Yeah,
up
pull it
so
up,
much
dude.
now. It's like, kill your darlings. Even when it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart, kill your darlings. And
Wow.
like, if you can do that, not get attached to a specific outcome with your art that you maybe have like created this whole thing and put so much time into it, and that the sunk cost fallacy of that is just that. And there might be one tiny little good part about it. And if you have the strength to just like throw the rest in the trash and keep that one good part,
Mm-hmm.
even though you spend so much time on the whole thing, you're going to have such a better end product than you would if you're like, marrying the details. Love
Definitely.
it.
Yeah, that like ability to self-edit, to like be able to like
Hmm.
let go, to distill things down. I figure I've seen in my own like creative journey, like over time, like slowly trying to let go of trying to do every little detail all the time and trying to get down to like the
Hmm.
essence of what it is I'm trying to do,
Yeah.
but I feel like
Uh-huh.
that's an ongoing process. You produce,
Yeah.
do you produce your the music like post production, like after recording? Are you a big part of that side?
Yes. For the Sometimes Islands music, it's been very different from the general process of like writing a song, recording the song, mixing the song, and then mastering the song and distributing it. But the Sometimes Island, it's more like I will come up with the ideas for the song, and I will keep those away from uh recording for as long as possible. Like just keep it at living just as voice notes or in my head or whatever
Hmm.
until I fully know what the song is and sounds like. And then I'll start to record it, and I'll do a little bit here and a little bit there. And that'll actually inform the song itself. Maybe it takes a complete left turn at that point. And I produce pretty much the whole thing, and then
Wow.
we'll mix it. And I've started having other people mix it as well as a little more, because I feel like there is a point of where even if I don't see that I'm doing it, I'm like getting attached to stuff that doesn't matter in it, and I
Hmm.
need other people to help get rid of that. And then definitely hire out the mastering process, because that's just about having really nice gear. And I guess
Right.
like a good gear, it's much more science than it is art, where like mixing is. Maybe some engineers will disagree with me, but
For sure.
yeah, I like try to keep it all in house as much as possible, and try to just be open and like not getting attached to stuff, because the more I can take away from something and still hear what I heard before in the idea, then that detail never belongs, just like
Really.
keep it minimal. Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's such great advice for people out there who are starting art practices or on their
Hmm.
beginning their art journey is, sometimes, like the old adage, like less is more. And it's a real
Hmm.
thing, but I think it takes time to develop that sensitivity in terms of like editing and stuff. You have to listen to a lot of music. You have to be
Hmm.
critical. You have to really take a strong look at what you're doing and align it and compare it to like what this vision is in your heart, in terms of
Hmm.
what it is you want to ultimately express. And there's a lot of play there. What's sort of
Yeah.
your like creative process in terms of writing your music?
There's two distinct sides, and one is like the creating and one is like the editing. And I keep editing out of the creating part entirely. Like
Yeah.
if I feel like if you edit as you create, you're just gonna get stuck. And so
Mm,
sort of like create something without any sort of regard for like if it's good or if other people are going to like it, but just like dive in there. And so for that side of things, like to answer your question, I think half of it, if I'm lucky, is just like inspiration. Like there's this space in between waking up and going to sleep that keeps me from getting enough sleep sometimes. Or like right when you do wake up, that there's like an idea. And if you
yeah.
can get down that idea, that is it just like comes from somewhere else. And then the other half of it is like just sort of the craft of it, of like sitting down when I don't feel particularly inspired or I feel tired or hungry or whatever, and just creating something. And I feel like it's rarer that you'll get something really, really good that comes out of that type of session. But having that skill will allow the times where you do feel inspired, or the times there's this like fleeting melody or image or whatever it is that's popped into my head at like 2 in the morning right before I'm drifting off, and I need to jump up and record it without like waking up completely. Like it helps that side.
You're like
So
in that metacog state, like we're in that
yeah.
liminal space of consciousness between waking and dreaming. And I think in those spaces, like I can relate, like I feel like I sometimes can have like crazy insights in those kind of moments,
Mhm.
because we're like sort of in this detethering phase from the physical body and moving into that dream space,
Yeah.
and it's in that space that like creativity is at its most manifest. I mean, think about a dream. Like talk
Uh-huh.
about, you know what I mean? Or the astral plane, whatever you want to call it. Like this is the
Uh-huh.
ultimate creative zone where like
Yeah.
anything is possible. And so to be able to like grab onto like a nugget of inspiration and be able to like pull it down from those planes of consciousness and manifest it physically, like whether it's, I guess, like I heard you say, like making voice notes or something, like that's
Yeah.
that stuff. Those are like little gifts, you know?
Dude.
And I think that
Yes.
having the discipline to just get up and get it down is so important, as opposed to saying to yourself, oh, I'll remember it in the morning, because odds are you won't, you know?
Yeah, you never will. I'm so curious for I haven't talked to a lot of visual artists, especially not one where like I really love your style and the kind
Oh,
of stuff that
thanks.
you make. Do you ever like paint your dreams? Like do you see something and you're like, I need to get that down? Like how does that process work for you when you're creating something?
Sometimes, yeah, it's not really like a, because my work isn't really super narrative based, but like there's these
Right.
images, right? Like there's
Mhm.
these definitely like I remember for a few years I was, and I still do, but not like as seriously as I was for a number of years, dabbling in like lucid dreaming and like
Yeah.
really trying to cultivate this wakeful state within the dream, and had some just really far out experiences in those spaces where
Yeah.
there are these flashes of images, and a lot of times they are like, I find myself when I get in those spaces of like waking, you know, dream states, I'm
Uh-huh.
usually flying through the cosmos, looking in wormholes and flying past planets and like
Wow.
experiencing like nebulous space of like infinite light. It's wild shit, you know?
Wow.
And this is, I can count on my hands like how many times that's happened, but like when
Right.
it does, it's like, holy shit, there's this whole side of the consciousness in the lucid
Yeah.
space that is pristine. And so sometimes, yeah, like they'll stay with me. Other times, like I've been big into like meditation for a long time, and
Hmm.
been on a deep meditative journey for myself to, as a part of my healing process. I feel like for me, my art and my sort of gravitation toward this life of being an artist really
Hmm.
relates a lot to this idea of healing through uncovering like the true nature of my reality, you know, what the
Yeah.
hell's going on kind of thing. And and every now and then there's sometimes these visions or like things that pop into, like it's almost me and my other friends. I have a close group of friends down here who are artists as well, and we're
Hmm.
all into this lucid dreaming psychedelic space, and we
Yeah.
always like refer to it as like a download, you know, it's like the universe,
Oh.
it's like we're downloading something from the universe into our consciousness. And so I don't know, I don't think it necessarily comes from me in terms of consciously. I think it's something that
Yeah.
I'm just like tapping into or receiving. And so sometimes those will come into it, and other times it's kind of like what you were talking about too, like playing, like I have this like feeling of openness, you know, that
Hmm.
I'm trying to kind of express and trying to make it sort of terrestrial. Like a lot of my work now is about like kind of bridging heaven and earth. So you see a lot of like
Uh-huh.
atmospheric qualities or like horizon lines and landscapes with these like cosmic orbs or like objects like floating, and you know, like I don't know if you know Terrence McKenna, like the transcendental
Oh,
object at
yeah.
the end of time. You know, it's like
Uh-huh.
kind of silly thing. So sometimes it comes through like playing a little bit with those sort of forms,
Uh-huh.
but it varies, you know. I think sometimes you probably have this experience, like sometimes the inspiration will come, like you were saying, like in that sort of metacognitive state between waking and dreaming.
Hmm.
um and other times it just, and or like in, you know, psychedelic trips, definitely have a lot of, you know, experiences in those that really have
Hmm.
informed my imagery over the years big time. But other
Hmm.
times it just hits me like a bag of bricks out of the blue sky, like out of nowhere, man. Like I'm not even doing anything. I'm like riding my bike with my son on the way to school, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
I really see the condition I'm in, and I'm like, all of a sudden it's like I like shoot out of my body, and I see that I'm just a dude on a bike with another dude, my young son,
Uh-huh.
on a rock floating in infinite space. And it's like I just
Yeah.
explode out to the edge of the universe and then back in like a flash, you
Hmm.
know? I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain those moments, but they're inspiring, you know? And I want to like try to express that feeling of like expansive infinitude while
Yes.
also being grounded in earthly sort of terms. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
No, 100%. I'm actually like relating to that a lot. I used to have this happen more, but like in that exact space of like almost falling asleep or something, I would have my eyes closed and there'd be this like sensation of like falling backwards but up and away from myself until everything is just like zoomed out really far. Sometimes it's so jarring that like that will wake me up. I'm like, oh,
Definitely. I know exactly what you mean.
but yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that the people take for granted, and the moment that you can kind of get outside that can either be like a really anxiety provoking scary experience, or if you're in like kind of like a calm space, like it can be really really revelatory about just getting like a 3D view of something that you had just been looking at in your own like tunnel vision kind of way, and thinking about
Yeah.
what's coming up next, and then what do I have to do to make sure that this happens so that that doesn't happen, and so on.
Uh-huh.
That is
Yeah.
life, but it's nothing that like we really we like asked for. There's consciousness like still a mystery to science. I was reading this article. I wish I'm just like quoting stuff that I don't have the reference for right now, but like this thought that our brains are not consciousness generators, but they're more of like a radio, like picking up on something
Yes.
that's there. And
Hmm.
so it is, then funneled into like our physical, we're in a body and like we need to eat calories and like get sleep and drink water. But that consciousness is just something that we're like picking up that is operating this kind of like, ghost in the machine type thing that is also affecting our brain, which is affecting our interpretation of our consciousness. But the consciousness itself isn't something that our brain has like evolved to project a movie so that we don't die. That's just like a tiny, tiny part of it,
I know, man. That's such a fascinating thing to contemplate. And there's such a debate about like consciousness. Yeah, exactly what you're talking about. Like,
Mhm.
is the brain a generator or a receiver of consciousness?
Yeah.
And I think the more we dive into these quantum physics realms, we're
Hmm.
realizing it's the latter. It's a receiver of
Yeah.
consciousness, and it's like because everything seems to be wavelengths, right?
Right.
And like this whole particle wave theory where like something can be both a wave and a particle at the same time. What the
Uh-huh.
hell does this mean? How like this back here isn't really there until I turn around and like look at it. Like
Uh-huh.
it's
Right.
all pure potential until it manifests based on, my conditioning of my own brain.
Hmm.
To me it makes more sense to think about life in that way, that our brains are receiving, especially having explored my consciousness and continually exploring it through meditative practice, breath work, and psychedelics. Like I
Hmm.
think that sort of initiates you into a different relationship with the mystery that's surrounding like what it is we're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And we want to, I think it's a convenient narrative to think that the brain's a generator of consciousness because it upholds the Newtonian material sort of framework that has built reality as we know it today.
Yeah.
But I think that that's built on false premises. I'm not a scientist though, so
Neither
I,
am I,
I think
dude.
that
Let's
there's, I
go.
think that I just think that there's so much more going on, and the more I have these openings in my own consciousness, it just seems. And then the more I study too, the ancient traditions on
Uh-huh.
this planet, the indigenous wisdom traditions, the Eastern philosophies, or even the Western esoteric Gnostic philosophies.
Hmm.
Um, I think they're all sort of expressing the same idea. And
Hmm.
it's interesting, like materialism and consumerism and this kind of reality we're living in where it's everyone's obsessed with material success and
Right.
comfort. I think it's a great time in our lives to see psychedelics come into the forefront, to see meditation be something more normalized, to
Hmm.
see artists who are maybe not necessarily talking about directly in the work, but be directly inspired by their own experiences exploring their consciousness. Like I think we're moving slowly, hopefully quickly, eventually into like a new paradigm. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
it feels like everything is kind of accelerating, and there is like, I feel like more of an attention to the direction because of that acceleration of everybody is thinking more about like thinking itself. And there was like a time not too long ago, you know, like 50 years ago, if somebody's like taking LSD and making music, it's like, oh well, that's gonna sound like trippy or this or that. And like now we're in a world of where like finance bros are microdosing and then going and trading stocks and stuff, and like
Right.
trying to see the Fibonacci patterns of a impending, like, you know, to help their day trading a little better.
I
And
know.
that they're not crazy doing that. Like everything is related to everything and it's all connected in this way that is like kind of beyond understanding. But I don't think that like we'll fully have like a grasp on the what without knowing kind of like the why as well, where like science will explain so much, but spirituality is like ubiquitous. It's like every, you look back through all of time and like what are some universal things that are between all cultures, is this sort of like acknowledgement of something more, and what and exactly how to have a relationship with that God, this like universe, everything higher power, is different from person to person. But like even science has come to the point of like, well, why is anything here? Well, it's just the Big Bang. What is the Big Bang? It's just like a tiny, 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 tiny bit more of yes than there was no that like exploded into everything,
I
you know?
love that. Oh my God. I love the way you phrase that. Exactly. Right. Because then it's like, I think there's a limitation. And I think this is why science and art are belong together, because I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of similarities between them. But I think what science does well, art doesn't necessarily try and do. And what art does really well, science isn't necessarily trying to do. So if we have
Mm-hmm.
conversations between them, I think we might get a bigger picture of what's going on, because science can try to reverse engineer and sort of break things down in a reductive way
Mm-hmm.
forever. I mean, there's no ending. I mean, we thought the atom was it, and then we're like, no, there's this quantum thing happening. There are these
Uh-huh.
quarks, and they're like, is that it? No, there's more. Just like it's infinitely going up and down, in and out, everywhere, all around
Uh-huh.
us. But then it comes back to your idea, or like the question you brought up is like, well, then what the hell's the point of all this? Like, what are we doing here? And
Right.
I think spirituality and spiritual traditions have a lot more to say about that than science does. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I'm never like a this over that kind of person. I'm kind of a both and,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot about I think a lot about it in terms of philosophically thinking, in terms of like relative and absolute truths, like in Buddhism, how the two
Mm-hmm.
truths are there. Like we can have this relative experience, like me in this body, you in this body, me with this life experience, you with that one, and us coming
Yeah.
together. But within that container of that relativity, there's this absolute space of interconnection.
Uh-huh.
And there was never a time when you and I weren't together talking
Yeah.
on a podcast. In some sense, you know what I mean?
A
It's
100%.
it's
Do you
a
think any
trippy world.
listeners are out there right now, having a psychedelic experience listening to this conversation right
I
now?
don't know, but if you are, you're safe and you're loved, and don't worry about a thing. It's all perfect.
It's all good.
It's all perfect. You're safe and you're loved forever and ever. That's my message to you.
Dude, that is
Um,
beautiful. That's
yeah,
like God, higher power, spirituality. That's the message. I feel like what is the reason? You know, like what's the
yeah,
point? And it's love. Like
yeah,
it's, we didn't get to decide the context in which we're existing, like the when and the why, or but like the why rather is just to love and to put love
yeah,
out there. That's
yeah,
my take on it, because I don't think that like that's something that, that's why you need the both sides, like the art and the science, because science will, you can quantify what like love has on a physiological level, or why you might want to feel this way because it has these positive outcomes and avoids
hmm
these negative ones. But there's a just consciousness and love are the things that it's just like it's really hard to put that down and sort of like measure it in a
yeah.
way.
but you
you know,
know it when you feel it, right? It's like
yes.
it's a knowing it, like it kind of it awakens like this inner wisdom inside all of us. This kind of
Uh-huh.
like I don't know, like when we say love, like people can be like, oh, I don't think Matt and I don't think are talking about like romantic love, even though that is a part of it. I think it's a bigger type of love, like a non-dual
Right.
love, like
Yes.
an infinite accepting of all things, an infinite container of security and oneness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
as artists and as a musician, it's like, listening to your music, like I was rocking out to your music today, like you can feel the love through the vibrations, in terms of the energy, even if you're singing about something that's, not necessarily like happy or like something difficult.
Right.
Like I think, in your song, like Acapulco, like you're singing sort of about like a change,
Yeah. 100%.
and change is really the thumbprint of our reality,
Mm-hmm.
constantly. But like it's hard,
It
but even in the
is.
hardship there's still love there.
Mm-hmm. Like getting up every day is like hard. It's harder for, people with like crushing depression than it is for somebody who's like really excited for, I don't know, whatever, the big game or something that is happening that day,
Yeah.
But like life is like painful and it just is unrelentingly like that. But it's the one context where I see the opposite of like humans, we tend to take negative stuff and notice that and remember that. And I guess there's evolutionary reasons for this, but then like find the positive stuff and take it for granted as quickly as possible and forget that a good thing happened. But with this kind of stuff that we're talking about, it's what makes all of the pain of everyday life worth it at all.
Right.
It's like,
Hmm.
why do either of us want to be artists? I'm betting it's some sort of like version of that, like there's some incredible moment that like I just want to communicate with other people.
Yeah.
And even if I only get to truly effectively do that one time perfectly, like all of this will be worth it. That's how I see
Definitely, dude.
this.
Yeah, because the art is like communication in its like largest sense. It's like a way for us to bridge a gap, like because we live these in these individualized, bodies, these we have boundaries,
Hmm.
we have barriers between what we consider me and what is not me. And again, we can
Hmm.
get heady and be like, well, those aren't really there. You're 99% empty space. There are no barriers. They're all constructions and illusions, which, yes, they are, but they're still real too. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
relatively real. And so art is almost like a way of like reaching out. And then when someone receives that art, it's like and resonates with it, they're reaching back, and then we're touching, we're connecting. It's like, that
Hmm.
the Sistine Chapel. I keep thinking,
Yeah.
with God and Adam, like they're this like dainty hand, like
Got
trying to
this
touch you.
limp
It's like
fingers
this,
towards
like,
each other.
I kind of want to touch you, but I kind of like being where I'm at. Um, but again, it's like I feel like it's like bridge building. It's communicating,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's through that it's like showing us that like we're not alone, and that we're
A
on this journey
100%.
together, and that like my destiny is wrapped up in your destiny and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so for me, that what that inspires is like a sense of responsibility to try and uphold a sense of humanity and dignity and sort of radical love and compassion
Yeah.
for this situation that is rife with suffering and difficulty.
Hmm.
But and everybody experiences, that in some way in their life.
Yeah.
No doubt, guaranteed. But
Yeah.
the question is like, is that pain and suffering, is it serving something else, or is it leading you towards something that you can't be aware of yet? In my experience, it has. Like, and so I
Hmm.
look at painful experiences that arise, suffering that I see in my personal life as like a form of teaching me and guiding me toward letting go more.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's easier
100%.
said than done when you're in the midst of it. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like our role ultimately is to again like be each other's like keepers, and saviors
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
lovers and best
Uh-huh.
friends.
Yeah.
We got
We'll
to
never
come
know
together.
we'll never know like what's happening like as it's happening, but it all is towards like I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. I'm a extremely spiritual person. I'm a Christian. That's something that I'd like grown up with and then kind of like gotten away from in my 20s. And then like even I remember when I was 19 at USC, like having a psychedelic experience and just sort of like looking at this like parking lot that I was standing in with my friends and just watching almost visually, but more like kind of the feeling of just like everything had like melded into like one thing. And there was no difference between me or the ground or these other things or anything
Wow.
else. And knowing in that moment that like, yeah, like there absolutely is something bigger out there that is like an author of this whole pattern that I'm seeing, and that like there's a reason this is happening now, and there was a reason that everything that led up to this point is also happening, and everything moving forward is like gonna be okay. Because I remember I kind of like came to again. I'm like walking down like this parking lot at USC, and I like turned to my friend and I was like, dude, grown-ups don't exist. And he was like, what do you mean? I'm like, like when we were like kids, we're like, oh yeah, like there's grown-ups, but that's not real, man. It's just like it's just us. And then we get older and like that's all that the people, everybody who's in charge of anything, they're just like just kids that just kept getting older, man. They don't know anything else that we don't. He's like, whoa, dude.
It's so true, man. We're all trying to
Yeah.
like, figure it out. And there's this notion that like the idea that there's, someone out there who knows everything is kind of a false one. Like I think
Yeah.
we know everything through each other, through connecting with each other because we
Hmm.
all we all have those pieces. I
Yeah.
love that experience that you speak of, like where everything kind of melds together and there is no
Yes.
separation.
Yeah.
I look at this stuff as a visual artist, and you might think about it as as a musician a lot too. I think a lot about like sacred geometry and like these
Hmm.
divine patterns that we see replicated in everything that's created.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned Fibonacci,
Hmm.
like the golden section,
Hmm.
phi ratio and everything, and then seeing all these forms, how there are like these infinite creative patterns that build everything, but they're really all just vibrations, like
Yeah.
wavelengths, that like
Uh-huh.
express themselves through geometry, but really it's all vibrations, it's wavelengths, visual, light waves and sound waves are the same thing. So
Hmm.
like for me, like I'm playing with light waves a little bit, reflective light waves, off of
Hmm.
pigments and stuff,
Yeah.
and trying to sacred geometry is just a big part of what I'm fascinated by, because I find it's like that the mathematics of it, the universality
Yeah.
of that language is something that is a clue for us. There's a
Yeah.
reason we see it everywhere. And when you're tripping on psychedelics,
Hmm.
depending on what kind of compound you are, how deep you are, what, certain
Right.
factors, but you can see the sacred geometry woven in everything.
Yes.
And,
It's like the intuitive nature of like, I remember like looking at a tree and being able to be like, I know exactly like logically like this, if it kept growing forever, like the trunk would have to get thicker like this, and these other things would like branches would come out here, which would split off into other branches. And this way that like my brain was in like a pretty like unlocked kind of state, but it already knows all this stuff, just like, like a succulent knows how to grow into like new leaves or extensions of itself that form the same pattern, or
Mhm.
like Romanesco broccoli. Get out of
Dude,
here.
whenever I'm in the grocery store and I see a Romanesco, man, I like stop and stare for a while. Like I remember one time, like because I don't get to see them that often. They don't come through the grocery store I
Right.
shop at that often. But I remember
Uh-huh.
like staring at for a while, and I like caught myself, be like, "Whoa, like, you're," like I was like probably there for 15 seconds. Some lady next to me is like, "Dude, are you okay?" I'm like, "Do you?" And I look at her, I go, "Do you see that? That's amazing." And
It
she's like,
is,
"Yeah,
dude.
it's a Romanesco." I'm like, yeah, but do you see what it's doing? Yeah, these like fractal geometries,
Yeah. Hmm.
I really like, like to explore, some woo woo, heady, like kind of esoteric little things like
That's
related
what we do
to.
on this podcast, man.
Dude,
Let's
I love it.
go
I
for
just think, regardless of what's true or not true, it fascinates me and I find resonance with it. But are you familiar with like the solfeggio frequencies and like how there are these certain, sort of wavelengths of sound, these certain frequencies that like align with like, 'cause, like, I don't know if you know, like, the solfeggio, like, the chords, like, the notes, like, the, you know, the, 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 like, the chakras of like, the
No, tell
yoga's
me
body
more.
system. Dude, it's crazy. So it's like you see it a lot. Are you familiar with binaural beats?
I know what they are. I used to have on the first shout out Cool Edit Pro 2.0 licensed to Peter Quistgard. I think like millions of kids
Yeah.
that same fake license had a binaural setting where you could do that to a wave track or something. And it's like supposed to like help you with like learning or sleeping or whatever. I haven't
Yeah.
listened to a lot lately, really
It gets
since
your
school
brain,
started.
it's like using sound waves to get your brain in like these different like theta states or delta
Okay.
states, like which like
Uh-huh.
when they look at like meditators under like MRIs and like kind of study them, they see like the brain state, the frequency state is in these
Mhm.
wavelengths of like theta or delta, and there's different levels. And talk about revert back to what we're talking about with consciousness being a receiver. It's like
Mhm.
depending on these wave states, the quality in the brain, the experience is different. And
Mm.
so I guess it's sort of predicated on that idea. But binaural beats are used to like, it's almost like a form of like sonic tripping. Really, like everyone out there, you
Yeah.
should try it. Like put on some headphones. Like you can probably find a ton on YouTube and just like lay
Mhm.
on your back, like you're just doing a relaxation meditation and let the music just like wash over you. It's amazing. It's
Mhm.
actually incredibly awesome. But the solfeggio frequencies are like these certain hertz. I don't know them by heart. Like I'll send you something later. Maybe I can flash
Okay.
actually something. I'm gonna flash something up right here that shows the solfeggio frequencies. Um, and they
Uh-huh.
align with the different sort of energy centers in the body. So like in
Yeah.
yoga tradition, you have the chakras, but you also see it in like the meridians and
Mhm.
Taoism and traditional Chinese medicine, or in Tibetan
Yes.
Buddhism, like the different energy centers. So a lot of cultures talk about these things. And so like you play these wavelengths and they create like a resonance. And like for example, like your heart chakra, so like a certain
Mhm.
frequency is a specific hertz, like I think it's 432 or something like this.
Okay.
Anyways, it's supposed to like do something to your energy body, and it's just fascinating stuff to think
Yeah.
about. And so I
It
don't know,
really
like as a
is.
musician, like playing with specific wavelengths, and aligning them with like maybe like how you tune your instruments or things like
Mhm.
this to kind
Mhm.
of touch into it. I'm curious if you've ever explored anything like that.
I think about this stuff a lot, and it's hard to put into practice with like because I'm making pop music, and
Exactly.
if I'm making like I really enjoy doing it, and I don't really like have an outlet to release it, but like making just sort of like Brian Eno type, like just
Hmm.
long form soundscape sort of stuff. And so the ways that I am able to implement that sort of stuff with my music is kind of like thinking not about the wavelengths, but about like what particular like BPMs are doing. Like I find that if people are walking briskly, it's about like 103
Hmm.
BPM. And so if the song is like kind of like a walking vibe, you might want to put it at 103. And if you put it at like 106 to 110 or something, it'll still maintain that vibe, but there's sort of like a rushed, hurried quality to it, even though you could go, a higher BPM than that, but it's just sort of like the way that your mind will think about it is slightly different. That it's like, oh, this is kind of like a fast walk, like I'm late for something, or like this is like a low, like a slower, like leisurely kind of thing. Like 128 is the BPM for a lot of like house music and stuff. And so
Yeah.
this is like
Okay.
the standard kind of like four on the floor, do kind of speed. So if you put a song at like 122 or something, it's still that, but it's like that's more like a deep house kind of like slowed down kind of vibe. And
Yeah.
so I think about BPMs a lot for that. And then for kind of like the key of the song, using a strange key, like putting something in C sharp instead of C, because like everybody can sit down at a play all the white keys on a piano and be like, oh, there's a C major scale or something, doing something like that. And then sometimes, I don't know how this affects people or doing it, but I seem to remember hearing that the whole universe is vibrating around like kind of like a B flat or something.
Wow.
And so I feel like B flat's a pretty like chill key to put your
That
song in.
sounds
It can be in
awesome.
harmony with the
That
universe.
sounds amazing. I love it, dude. I mean, that makes sense, like how I like how you're sort of like thinking about like the listener's experience and sort of
Hmm.
how like the song that you're making is going to mirror or influence the kind of experience that the person's going to have. Like, you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
pace that they're going to move, or the way
Yeah.
they're going to, kind of engage with the music. I think that's incredible. I think that's
Yeah.
on the same idea of like just being conscious of like sort of how the sound, the sonic quality and organization of the work you're creating is like,
Hmm.
outside of just the lyrical quality, which I find lyrics sometimes when they're paired right with the melody of the music or the way the music is, and
Hmm.
the lyric hits at the right point of the song, that's where like I have the biggest emotional experiences in music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like the right word at the exact perfect time of like where all the sounds are coming. But just like
Yes.
being intentional about those things are really fascinating. I don't know. I think sound like it's something, because I love music. I like to sing, but I'm not like good
Hmm.
singer, but like I don't play any instruments, but like I think about music a lot in relation to the art I make, because I've had certain synesthesia experiences where I'm like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Where I'm
A
seeing
hundred percent.
sounds, or I'm
Yeah.
like hearing, like I'm hearing something, but I'm like, seeing the light, or like vice versa, like I'm seeing
Yeah.
something and hearing it. And so there is such a relationship between what I'm doing and what you're doing. And
Hmm.
like I wish there was a way to like tap into that space more consciously in this
Yeah.
moment, to see like how you can manipulate that and like give someone else that kind of experience,
I've always thought about like a color wheel and just sort of like the way Western music divides this an octave into like 12 steps, and thinking of like, for some reason, I mean, I'm not synesthetic. I feel like I've had moments of feeling like I was, or wishing that I was, or like seeing, like when I was a kid, it used to be more prominent with like an A or a G, like around in that kind of frequency range, is like a orangey red kind of color. And then like over
Nice.
towards the E is more of like a blue sort of vibe. And but I remember when I was a kid, like numbers were certain colors, and like some days of the week were like very obviously certain colors to me. And
Wow.
I feel like that's like a thing with synesthesia, is like just sort of like being like, oh yeah, Wednesday's yellow. Like everybody knows that. And then thinking about it, you're like, wait, what? Like Wednesday's not yellow for you? What color
Yeah,
is it?
come
Oh, it's
on.
just Wednesday? All right, cool.
But there is such this relationship, between these
Yeah,
things. I mean, even when we look at like we look at the light spectrum, right? And we think about
yeah.
like the frequency of a wavelength is actually what determines its color. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But then you translate that into what the sound result would be. I mean, you're going to get a particular sound. And I think that's sort of where the solfeggio thing is kind of interesting to explore. I'm
Yeah.
also
Oh, that
interested.
reminds. Go
Yeah.
ahead. Sorry,
No, no,
man.
you go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah, like with the solfeggio frequencies relating to certain chakras and something, like binaural beats are a very like there's kind of like an outcome or something, or like people are trying to get something specific out of using them. Be like, I want to like be able to study and retain this information. So I'm going to listen to this type of binaural beat or something. Do the solfeggio frequencies have like a similar kind of thing of where people are like, I'm going to do some heart chakra thing because there's something that I
Yeah.
want to focus on in this area? Or like, how, to your knowledge, like
Definitely.
how is
Yeah,
that?
definitely. Yeah. So like I have some, like I remember there used to be this community acupuncture place like around the corner from my house. I'm sad they're gone. I miss you, community acupuncture. It was great. But I would go in there and I would plug into, I have this like playlist of different like solfeggio, songs that are kind of geared toward the different chakras. And I would just like have like a healing session, and I would like,
Yeah.
so each one would resonate with a certain part of the body. And then there's a whole system aligned with the chakras. So like,
Hmm.
like from, the base chakra, the what's called like in, Vedic systems, like the Muladhara chakra, the root,
Hmm.
has to do with like survival, has to do with like sort of bodily autonomy and like a feeling of safety,
Hmm.
and then there's stuff that's aligned with each of them. And so you do intentionally, like I know that there are like artists out there, musicians who intentionally use those frequencies for healing
Hmm.
certain parts of the body, which are
Yeah.
associated with different psychological states, as well. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a cool thing. I don't know, I'm not a musician, so like I don't really fully understand the language or the technical side of it, but I've just find that always to be fascinating. And I think about sound so much as like, if you mentioned, that you were a Christian. Like I think about the
Hmm.
Bible, like in the beginning was
Yeah.
the word, which, is sound,
Yeah.
sound
Uh-huh.
creates everything. And then have you ever looked at like cymatics before? How
Dude,
like
I never
sound
even thought about the word, how that is like a sound that's like spoken.
that
That's
spoke, yeah, the
tripping me
sound,
out, man. Yeah,
dude. Yeah.
that's
The
crazy.
word was God, but like, whatever it is,
Like the Bible starts with like, first off, there's like string theory and something vibrated and then
Yeah.
creation happened.
Exactly, right? And so I think about like cymatics, which is the study of sound's impact on matter. And when
Okay.
you play certain frequencies, so you can probably YouTube this and look at it. Anyone
Yeah.
out there, if you've never seen it, it's so fascinating and beautiful to see. But essentially, like, you take like a metal plate and you put any kind of crystalline structure on it, whether it's like sand or salt or something that's crystalline, and you
Yeah.
pile it on this metal plate, and then you have like a speaker underneath it, and you play certain, and you have like a I don't know what it's called, but like a thing where you can just play tones, like frequencies. You know what I
Sure.
mean? A tone
Yeah. Like a,
generator
yeah.
sort of thing. And so you
Yeah.
play certain frequencies, and then there are certain points. I think this again is part of the solfeggio things. Like when you get to a certain frequency, all of a sudden the crystals vibrate, and then they form like a perfect symmetrical, mandala. And then the
Hmm.
the more intense the frequency is, the more complex the pattern becomes. And so it's
Wow.
just like, whoa, like crazy. So
Yeah, I
thinking,
am looking at images of this as you're talking about it, and it is
yeah,
blowing my mind. It's
it's
like kind of
crazy cool.
snowflake stuff, but like
Yes.
so much more infinitely complicated.
Oh my God. Yeah, they get crazy. I remember once I was with some of my friends here. We used to throw this party on Mardi Gras, the Wake of
Uh-huh.
Endymion. Shout
Uh-huh.
out to the Motheroos and all the mothers out there. But we used to throw this party, and we would have our friends who were in bands play and stuff. And our
Yeah,
one of my buddies, Forrest, he had this like old school overhead projector, like your old math teacher would have with like,
right.
right, and he would put these dishes of water on it, and with the sound, the subwoofer, especially in that space, it would
Hmm.
vibrate, and you would see these incredible patterns just pop up
Wow.
on the water projected onto the band's faces and stuff.
That is
It was so cool.
insane.
So there is
My,
again this relationship between like form,
uh-huh.
visual form and sound. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so I
It's
think there's
crazy.
such
Dude, you're making me think of my science teacher in high school showed us this thing of where like if you tie a laser pointer to the ceiling and get it to be perfectly still, so it's just like projecting just a point onto
Mhm.
the wall that you can see. And then you put like a speaker next to it, kind of like how you're saying, and you can play like classical music and it will just vibrate it. So it'll make like these like gently shifting orbs and stuff. You play it
Whoa.
like rock or like hip hop or something, and it's like these like jagged edges of like when the kick is hitting or like
Yeah.
and he's like, this is what's happening to your eardrum when you listen to this crap. And we're like,
Like, shut up. But that's
yeah.
cool. But think about it now, like it is cool, and it's something, back to what we are talking about, like everything is interconnected and related. It's like, you go far enough
Yeah.
one way, you go far enough this way, you're gonna end up right next to it on the other side. Like
Oh
everything
yeah.
is interrelated
Hmm.
with itself. And so for you and I, who are, both artists and but
Hmm.
working with a different medium, like I think we're still like exploring the same ideas, in some way of like,
Hmm.
how do we communicate? How do we express? And how do we also evolve our way of communicating and expressing so that we can connect with
Yeah.
with our audiences more and more deeply, more and more effectively over time, and
Yeah.
I'm using reflected light waves,
Uh-huh.
you're using sound waves, but you're also using language. I use language through titles. Like I like to have, kind of poetic or sort of weird titles, like,
Yeah.
whimsical titles and stuff, but they're kind of related to what I'm thinking
Yeah.
about with the work and stuff. So there's so
Yeah.
much, things we have in common here,
Well, art
which
is
is
just communicating emotion, isn't it?
right.
Like I was
Yeah.
trying to think of like what the definition of music would be, and it's like, I guess it's like sound experienced over time, but that could also be stuff that isn't music. That could be like, and then you could argue that, like just listening to traffic passing by is music. It's just a different kind. But I
Yeah.
feel like the third part of it is like a feeling communicated through sound over time. But if
Yeah.
what we're talking about is sort of just like waves communicated over time with the
Yeah.
goal of like a feeling, because I look at your art and I feel a certain way, and if I'm just looking at something and not feeling it, it's like I don't perceive it as art, even if it is. But if it makes me feel something, then
Yeah.
like that's the point, that's that connection of like we're
Exactly.
all, feeling and experiencing something. Like the ultimate musical experience to me is that like feeling that you get when you're like in a crowd at a live show and you like are looking at the people next to you and they're having like the best time and you're having the best time. You
Yes.
happen to make eye contact or something. It's not like, who's this weird stranger looking at me? It's just like this kind of like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we're
we get
here
it, we get
together,
it, we get it.
we're
Yeah.
having this like shared experience together,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, to me, like those, I know exactly what you mean. That's exactly what I love about going to concerts and
Uh-huh.
experiencing live music. I'm curious for you, like, because touring is such a big part of being a musician.
Hmm.
Like, what is your view of touring? Like, how do you approach a tour? Like, in terms of your intention behind him, like, are tours like opportunities to like get better at like playing together and also at the same time connecting? Like, because I can imagine it being having its own different challenges outside of just writing the music. Like, what are
Oh, yeah.
your relationships with touring as a musician?
It's yeah, it's a lot more like being you can sit in a studio and be comfortable and like order food and like sit there and be comfy. Tour is like so much more about like you're just brought to being like, yeah, this is also kind of like about survival. It's like make sure that like we don't crash the van and that we like get enough sleep and we get there on time and like do our thing. But you're kind of like a it's a little bit more of like a vibe of being like a pro athlete on a smaller level of like for me I have to make sure that my voice is sounding good, and so like
Mm-hmm.
I have to like think about like what I'm putting in my body and like how I'm taking care of myself. And but being on tour is like it's one half like just a really intense form of marketing, and the other half, the true half, is like this is what it's all about. Is like getting in front of people who are going to like have an experience with your music, and that is like the real like spiritual reason of like why I want to do this at all, is because that's kind of like what it's all about. And so then you start to
Yeah.
find like different crowds have different vibes, and like different cities will have different kind of personalities that you can start to pick up on. Like I'm here in LA right now, and like LA, I love you, but like a very like folded arm, nodding your head kind of energy of like yeah, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna get another drink. Are you guys good? Okay, cool. Yeah, this is fun, right? Where
Yeah.
there's like a more in some places we went to Richland, Washington, which is much more of like a unbridled, like just sheer joy kind of energy.
Wow.
But our experience of that was rolling up being like, where's Richland, Washington? Like, what is this place? Getting there and then being like, yo, this is a Thai restaurant. This isn't a venue. What are we doing here? And then talking to the owner, and she's like, "Oh yeah, like it's actually it turns into like this kind of like club at night, and it's like it's had a bunch of famous jazz musicians come through. Victor Wooten used to come here and like play all the time, and we're
Wow.
like, okay, all right." And then people started kind of like coming in, and we're getting set up to play the show. And I pop outside for a second, and there's this guy who like offers me like some of his joint, and he's like, dude, like I know all the words to your songs and like you're my favorite band. And I was just like,
Wow.
what is happening right now? I thought we were just at the Thai restaurant, and
That's
it's turned into
so
something
cool.
else.
You just never know who you're gonna like connect with. And I
Yeah.
think the point is to put it out there and to be touring and getting into people's spaces and showing face and like
Hmm.
really like and getting to experience your energy. Cause I think,
Yeah.
a rule of thumb I have is like you never really know how good or a band is or understand a band until you see them perform,
Yes.
because you can do so much in the studio post production these days, like the energy and the authenticity the moment like they're on
Mm.
stage and they're
Hmm.
expressing themselves and letting themselves go and
Yeah.
embodying. You're like, you become a channel. Do you feel that way when you perform, that you just like empty yourself?
100%, dude.
you
You
know
gotta be like, I don't know what heaven is gonna be like, or like what that's gonna be like after we're dead, but I feel like it's gonna be just an endless concert that I'm always playing. For me, it's like
oh
this sort of like you're not thinking about what you're doing, but you do have to be thinking about like how things are going. It's like a conversation you're having with like
mhm.
looking at people and like how their vibe is and what's your vibe. But if you start actually thinking, like that's the moment I'll be like, oh crap, like I just forgot like the words for the next part, or like I'm like, like
Yeah.
suddenly aware that I'm like playing a guitar that is here and I'm listening. And so I just try to like turn your brain off entirely
Yeah.
and yeah, channel that energy, just be in the moment. You've rehearsed, you know what you're doing. Don't think about it, just do it. Because even like it's either like, if it's like a huge show where there's like a bunch of people, you could be like, oh no, the moment's too big for me, I'm gonna like screw up, and then you will manifest that you will screw up.
Yeah, right.
Or if it's the opposite and you're like playing to like the bartender and the other opening bands who are there and no one else, and you're just like, what's the point? Like, why are we here? We're, like losing money, and like I'm only getting older, and like everything's hopeless. Or you can just be like, you know what? Fuck it. Floor to the floor. Like we're just like gonna get out here and bring like go as hard as we possibly can. And
Yeah.
those few times I feel like that you like get to just sort of just go for it in front of no one. You never really know who's there and who's not there.
Yeah,
And
man.
I
You
don't know
never
if
know
you've
who
ever.
needs it, like who might need
Yeah.
this medicine right now. You know what
Yes,
I mean? Like
100%.
who needs this medicine right now? Like you're performing a service, and it's a sacrifice in a way. You have to like we were talking about at the very beginning when we kind of hear about
Hmm.
like the ego, like this
Hmm.
this tendency to want to like, achieve praise and success and all that. But like
Yeah.
that stuff's all ephemeral. It's not the point of what this is. The point is like what
Oh,
you were saying, like the communication,
yeah.
and the connection that
Yes.
you're creating. So like if you're doing that with that one person who's sitting at the bar, just like, damn, this is sick. Like then like then
Yeah.
that's part of the mission too, is like
Yes.
you, regardless of who shows up, they're going to get the medicine of my love that I put in, and my blood, sweat, and tears I put into manifesting and creating this thing that never existed before,
Yeah.
and here it
Uh-huh.
is right now. It's hard to remember
Yeah.
that though, I'm sure at times. And that's the journey of any artist. It's gonna,
I mean, we're all
you know,
human. Yeah, like we're gonna like feel discouraged or encouraged by like good or bad things, but it's a really like it's kind of like this like really temporary thing, live shows of like you are playing a show with these people, and it's like this this particular version of these songs and this particular moment that you're having with this particular crowd, and it's like there, and then like it's over, and like that'll never happen again. There can be another show, the same set list, even maybe even the same people if it's like crazy enough that that could turn out, but it'll be a different show every time.
yeah, each
It's like
time.
this, we're having a conversation right now, and like the only way it could ever be the same every time is if we like just wrote it down and then like posted it on a blog. But even then, like the reader of that conversation would have a certain mood that they were in and whatever's happening in their life,
Yeah.
and it's going to come out a slightly different way. So you're trying to cut down to, I think about this when I'm writing songs too, is like what is that like pure simple, like what is like the essence of like this like catchy melody that I'm trying to write? Like what is like the most like basic, pure, simple thing that I can put out there that's going to be like speaks to something larger and gets to that like triple entendre level that I'm going for. When I write lyrics, like if somebody's like, hey man, like what is your song about? I'm rarely gonna be like, all right, this is like what I wrote this song about. This is
Yeah.
exactly what it means. I'm more like, well, like what did you get out of it? Like what does this mean to
Right.
you?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they'll hit on like one of the two things that I intended. Maybe there's like a third level that like I didn't even know was there. And I'm like hearing somebody else's reading of the song and been like, oh wow, yeah, I guess it's hard for me to like take credit for being like, yeah, I totally meant that too. But like now it means that because it's
Yeah.
out of my hands. It's not, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It's like
Yes.
it's like something that I helped create or I created, and then like it was no longer mine, and everybody else is it belongs to them now,
Yeah, it's channeled, it's created through you, through the
Yes.
filter of your personality, your life experience, your skill sets and stuff. But at the
Uh,
end of the day, like, yeah, it doesn't belong to you anymore once it's out there. I feel that way
yeah.
about my art. It's like I can't stand there and like defend my art forever. Like it has to live its own life, like a child. Like you got to let it live its own life, and it's going to survive or it's not. But like you can't be there to try to control that
Mhm.
fact. You just have to let it out. and put it out
Yeah.
there,
You sound
you
like a
know.
good dad, man.
I like being a dad. I have a
Yeah.
great little son. You know, he loves the podcast. He actually, every time I get done with the podcast, he wants to jump on and record his podcast, which is generally about
Oh,
football these days.
that's awesome. How old is he?
He's four. He's four.
He's
So
four.
it's bonkers. It's hilarious. It's like,
Wow.
yeah. No, but
That's
that's been an
cool.
amazing process to like get back into that creative childlike mind, that imaginative
Yes.
realm, you know. I'm
Hmm.
already like in it all the time just by virtue of what I do, but regardless if you consider yourself being an artist or not, like I think it's so
Hmm.
crucial to be in that continually connected to these imaginal spaces, because that's where like
Hmm.
that's the realm of infinite possibility. And if you're cut off from
Yeah.
that, your life is ultimately, in my opinion, limited.
Yeah.
You know, and so like he reminds me of that all the time, you know, this
Hmm.
playful spirit that he has.
That's
Yeah,
amazing, man. I don't
it
have
is.
any kids, but like that's gotta be like I just can't even imagine just like
It's
the
trippy.
yeah.
It's trippy, man.
Kids really like know what's going on too with like what you're saying about just unbridled creativity and like playing and like pretending stuff. Like that is the
Yeah,
most activated and stimulated like the human brain gets is when you're playing, when you're just having
definitely.
fun with stuff. And
Definitely, dude.
you know,
I
it's
know
important.
we have to find ways to cultivate that. Like I'm sure you're playing a lot with like little riffs on the guitar, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And getting silly, you know, with your
Yeah.
bandmates. I can imagine that, you
Yeah.
know, like, and then all of a sudden you just through that, you stumble across like a certain arrangement of notes or like that you've never really put
Mhm.
together before. And you're like, I'm gonna remember that and it's coming into
Yeah.
play at some point. I think that's where some of the best things can happen. And I think because I think the energy of play to me is non-attachment. It's
Hmm.
not like this high stakes, super serious business. It's the opposite, you know?
100%.
And
Yeah.
so, like, that's where you're going to get some of the real magical qualities of artistry coming through. So,
Hmm.
like, cultivating that to me is really important, you know?
It's super important, dude.
Yeah,
There's
man.
no creativity without like playtime, you know? Like you
Definitely,
gotta set
dude.
aside time to be like, you know, I'm not oh man, I need to like finish this for that or whatever. Like, no, like you need to, you know, sit down when it doesn't matter when you're just, you know, it doesn't there's no like stakes to this and I'm just
Yes.
gonna like try something out and it's going to be cool or it's not going to be cool and I don't care. I'm going to try something else. And
Yeah, yeah, man.
my band and I were rehearsing in the in on the East Coast when we were doing like the last part of our tour and we for the first time we're like I feel like we have like everything down that we need to have down. We can just kind of screw around now and we played like Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. I get knocked out, you know. We played we have a song called Succulent. That's a very like it's kind of like a very succulenty sounding kind of song. It just like punked it out and we're like playing it
Nice.
like a punk band or something.
Oh, cool.
And it worked. And it was just like everybody was just like smiling afterwards.
Yeah,
Nobody was
man.
like I don't know, it's fun, it's a fun job, but it's still a job. Sometimes we're like done with the rehearsal and be like, all right, man, well, yeah, I'm gonna go like, you know, hit the gym and I'll see you later, bye, or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
so everybody's just like talking about like what we were just doing and like joking and it was
Yep.
fun, you know.
Dude,
Chill.
and you got to keep that in it. You know what I mean? Because if you
Hmm.
lose that, because it's not always going to be fun, but like you got to make
Yeah.
sure, I feel like, to find those touch points where you remember why it is you're doing this thing in the first place, why it is you're sacrificing what you're sacrificing. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? In terms
Yeah.
of all the things artists have to sacrifice in order to pursue their craft
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
evolve. You know,
Yeah.
it's so important.
It
But
is 100%
well, I'm
like
grateful to artists like yourself because like it lives the example. You know what I mean? Like, you know, to see you, you know, to see you out there doing what you're doing is just it's
thank
just
you.
really special and inspires me as a visual artist because it's like here's a like-minded person who's out there pursuing what they love, putting it on the line, you know,
Hmm.
growing and changing and trying to continue to like be, you know, the pure expression of who you are. You know what I mean? That individuality and like it's a beautiful thing, you know? Yes,
Thank
we're
you.
all one, but I think our individual expressions is what makes life worth living because it's so exciting and interesting.
Dude,
Otherwise, it'd be
you
hella boring.
inspire yeah, you inspire the crap out of me too. I'm just like sitting here thinking about like we met like I think like at the USC playing on the lacrosse team or something was the first time I met you.
Yeah,
And
dude,
now
like
here we
way back.
are. like
Oh
having
man.
gone to this like way too expensive school, and we're both
Yeah.
like, yo, I'm gonna make art.
Yeah,
And
exactly,
like, I
dude.
don't care.
No,
I'm
I
gonna go
remember.
for truth rather than dollar signs. And
But I
I
think
think
that's why we were always like connected. You know what I mean? Like we, of
uh-huh.
course, we've like, kind of lost touch like over the years a little bit, but I've always like kept an eye on what you're up to. And
Likewise, man.
we've always maintained that connection because I think we recognize like we're on a similar path of like
Hmm.
pursuit,
Yeah,
through our artistry and that connection's going to maintain itself for a long time, dude. Cause,
absolutely.
and
I'm so glad you reached out and wanted to do this podcast. I was just
yes,
like super stoked, and I was like, yeah, man, it
nah,
was as if we'd been talking this whole time. And I
I
know we
know, right?
had.
Dude, like time is really a weird thing like that. We could
It
go
is.
over a decade without saying a word to each other and look at us. We're just riffing and talking. I mean, it's been
Uh-huh.
like, an hour and 15 minutes. So it's been
That's
amazing having
crazy.
you on the podcast. And for those of you out there who haven't heard the Sometimes Island, you got to check them out on their Instagram. I'm going to have everything in the show notes for you.
Mm.
And so please listen to their music, download it on your Spotify or your Apple Music, or wherever you listen to your music. And check out when you come on tour. I know a lot of musicians, a lot of them, New Orleans is a tricky place for musicians to tour through because of our, I don't know, say, but if you were ever, you want to come to New Orleans, you better let me know and I can, you know,
Can I
help
tell
you
you a
out whatever
secret?
way I can.
I've never even been to New Orleans. I grew up in Texas.
What?
I've never even been
Dude.
there,
Well,
dude.
we'll talk
Yeah.
later. We'll talk later, man. We
Okay.
gotta make that happen.
We
But
will.
I love you so much, man. I appreciate
Love
you.
you
And this has
too.
been such a fun conversation, dude. Super excited to connect.
Yes.
And yeah, y'all
Pleasure.
check it out. Sometimes Island. All right, peace, y'all.
Later.
Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Concerning the Spiritual and Art. If you like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you can stay in touch and in tune with all the amazing offerings that we're going to be bringing to this channel. Thanks again for all your support. Super grateful and excited to bring more content your way. Peace, y'all.